Welcome back to the Silent Report. Tonight we step into the shadows of World War II, where a secret so strange, so unbelievable, and so carefully hidden was carried out under the noses of millions. This is not the story of generals and their grand strategies, or soldiers storming enemy trenches in bloody battles. This is the story of an army that technically never existed. An army of illusions, created not with steel and gunpowder, but with rubber, paint, sound, and lies so elaborate that they fooled the most dangerous war machine in history. For over 50 years, the world had no idea it had even taken place. Only recently has the truth been revealed, and with it, one of the most haunting questions of modern warfare. If the world could be tricked this easily in the 1940s, then what illusions are being staged for us right now? The Ghost Army, as it is now known, was one of the most secretive projects of World War II. Officially it was called the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. But its real mission was deception, distraction, and illusion. It was made up not of hardened fighters, but of artists, architects, set designers, radio operators, and sound engineers. Men who would use their creativity to turn empty fields into battle zones, to make rubber tanks look like real armored divisions, and to convince German intelligence that armies were marching where no soldiers existed at all. In 1944, the Allies were pushing through France after the D-Day landings. The Germans were fierce and unrelenting, and every inch of territory came with a price in blood. But the Allies had an advantage, an invisible army in the shadows. The Ghost Army would slip into towns and fields at night, inflating hundreds of rubber tanks that could be carried by just a few men, positioning fake artillery, and stringing up camouflage nets to make everything look authentic from the air. The Germans flying reconnaissance missions would snap photos and send back intelligence, convinced they had discovered a massive troop buildup. They would then redeploy forces to counter a threat that didn't exist. But the deception went far beyond inflatable tanks. Trucks were outfitted with giant loudspeakers capable of blasting recordings of troops marching, tanks rumbling, and artillery fire echoing through the night. The sound engineers perfected the art of psychological manipulation, broadcasting hours of carefully designed noise that gave the impression of massive troop movements. To a German soldier huddled in the darkness, those sounds meant one thing: the Americans were coming. And yet, the fields were empty, except for a handful of men creating an illusion. Perhaps the most daring element of all was the radio deception. Skilled operators mimicked the transmissions of real Allied divisions, sending out fake orders, creating false chatter, and tricking German intelligence into believing that units were moving where they were not. These fake signals could be picked up by enemy spies and analysts, adding another layer of credibility to the illusion. From the sky, from the ground, and even over the airwaves, the Ghost Army made fiction look like reality. But this was not a game. Every mission carried the weight of life and death. The men of the Ghost Army had no real weapons to defend themselves with. If the Germans had discovered that their tanks were rubber, their artillery was wood, and their divisions were made of sound and paint, the entire unit would have been annihilated. These men stood in harm's way, luring enemy divisions toward them, knowing that if their cover was blown, they would be slaughtered. One of their most critical operations took place as the Allies prepared to cross the Rhine River, the last major obstacle before entering Germany. The Ghost Army was tasked with convincing the Germans that the crossing would happen at a completely different location. Over a matter of days, they staged a massive deception, building fake camps, positioning inflatable tanks, and blasting sound effects of troops preparing for battle. The Germans fell for the ruse, diverting their forces to the wrong location. When the real crossing happened miles away, the Allies met far less resistance, saving thousands of lives and speeding the end of the war. In total, the Ghost Army carried out more than 20 deception operations across Europe. They are credited with saving an estimated 30,000 American lives. Yet when the war ended, their story was buried. For more than half a century, their existence was classified top secret. Families of the soldiers never knew what their sons and brothers had really done. Even the men themselves rarely spoke of it, bound by oaths of silence. The world simply forgot them. It was not until the 1990s, when documents were finally declassified, that the truth came out. The Ghost Army was real. Their operations had been critical to Allied success. And yet, their names were missing from the history books. Only decades later were they given recognition, and in 2022, they were finally awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. For many, the honor came too late. The veterans were old, and many had already passed away. Their story, once erased, was finally acknowledged, but its shadow remains. And now we are left with questions. If illusions could be staged so convincingly in the 1940s with nothing but rubber, wood, and sound effects, what kind of illusions are possible today? We live in a world of holograms, deepfakes, satellite manipulation, and artificial intelligence. If an entire army could be faked 80 years ago, what entire realities might be manufactured right now, before our very eyes? Wars are shown to us on screens, reported by governments and media outlets we are told to trust. But how much of what we see is real? How much is illusion? Could modern warfare be filled with new ghost armies, digital, holographic, or psychological, fighting battles not on the ground, but in the minds of people across the world? The Ghost Army was declassified, but not destroyed. Its legacy lives on in modern military deception units, in psychological operations, and in strategies designed to manipulate perception itself. What began as rubber tanks in European fields has evolved into something much darker, much harder to detect, and far more dangerous. Because in war, the truth is always the first casualty. And when truth dies, illusions can control the world. For the men of the Ghost Army, their mission was noble. They risked their lives to protect others, to save their fellow soldiers from slaughter, and to bring the war to a quicker end. But the tools they pioneered, deception, illusion, and manipulation, have become the silent weapons of our age. Their story is both inspiring and chilling. It shows us that war is never just about guns and bombs, but about perception, belief, and the manipulation of reality itself. The Ghost Army was America's army of shadows, a weapon made of lies, illusions, and courage. For decades, it was forgotten. But now, as we look back, we must also look forward, and ask ourselves, how many ghost armies are still out there, fighting battles we cannot see, in wars we do not even know are being waged? This was the Silent Report. Stay vigilant, question everything, and remember, sometimes, the most dangerous weapons are the ones we can't see.